I wanted to start this video with an apology, because if you've watched any of my other videos, you've probably noticed that almost all that I talk about is Claude Code. But now, after having conversations with dozens of business owners, one of the first questions that I seem to get asked is, so what exactly is Cursor? And in wild times, Elon Musk and SpaceX actually have just paid $10 billion for the option to acquire Cursor for $60 billion in the next year. So in this video, we're not going to walk through a tutorial of building something using AI. Instead, I'm going to slow down a bit and actually talk through my exact setup that I use to actually launch websites or iPhone apps in hours. This video will be for you if you've actually already shipped something in something like Lovable, or you've even used the Claude desktop app and used Claude Code there, but now you're looking to dial it up a bit. So Cursor can actually be a lot of things. And in this video, I'm probably going to underutilize it. And that's because I use it in a very specific way. Specifically, I use it as the main interface for me to interact with Claude Code. And that's definitely not why Elon's going to try to buy this thing for $60 billion. But it works for me, and you can use it how you'd like. But as a result, I'm just going to scratch the surface in terms of what it's actually capable of doing. And depending on how you use it is probably going to determine how you pay for it. I am a paid user, but if you're actually going to try to use it to use something like Claude Code, like I will, you can definitely get away with it on the free plan. If you want to truly maximize it, you're probably going to want to be on one of the paid plans. So in its most simplest form, Cursor is what's known as an integrated development environment. And it actually started as a kind of version of one of the most popular IDEs, which is called VS Code, which is an open source project owned by Microsoft. And if we look here, what that essentially means is we've got all of our files of code that exist on our computer, and we need a way to view and edit our code. So if I come into, looking at our current Cursor screen, we can see that in this setup, we've got two panes. On the left, we've got our directory, which is a list of all our folders and files. And on the right pane, we've got a window which ultimately lets us actually work with these files. So in this case, I've clicked on a Claude MD file, and I can come in here and I can make changes. Now you've already got this essentially on your computer. Here, I've gone into my Finder and I've come to this project directory. And as you can see, all of the folders and files actually exist here on my computer as files. And I can open them as a text document. So here's the same document that I've opened here, but in this case, it's simply a text file. So in its absolute simplest form, you can use Cursor to view and manage files on your computer with ease. So much so that when we get to the agent part, you could just ask Cursor to make files. For example, if you needed to create 20 spreadsheets, each with specific customer names, but have them fit within a template, you could ask a Cursor agent to do that, and it would. So how does Cursor actually do this? Well, it's directly connected to your computer through what's called the terminal. I like to think of the terminal as kind of what hackers would use if they wanted to hack into your computer. If you've seen, The Matrix or the binary code or any movie or TV show with hack. Typically the way that that's depicted is through the terminal. And you can access your terminal through the application finder. Simply type in terminal and open it, and you're going to get something that looks kind of like this. And this is a direct line of communication to your actual computer. It just doesn't have an amazing user interface. Now, I'm going to age myself a bit here, but chances are if you're a bit older than I am, you might have seen this before on some of the early computers. And if you're younger than me, you definitely probably haven't seen this. But back before a real user interface, this is how you would interact with a computer. So just like I had the ability to view this file as a text file through the Finder, I can actually find this file through the terminal. When working with Claude Code or Cursor, there's probably less than 5 commands you ever need to use in the terminal. So for example, if I type in ls and hit enter, that's actually going to show me every file and folder in the current directory that I'm in. So you can see here, these are pretty much all my coding projects. This folder is called knowledge base. So I'm going to use the next command, which is cd, which stands for change directory. And then I'm going to type the name of the directory, hit enter, and now you can see that I'm inside the knowledge directory or folder. I'll type ls again, and you can see everything I can see here in this folder is actually here as well. So if I wanted to edit the Claude MD, I'd have to now go through a series of steps in the terminal to edit that. Instead, I'd much rather use Cursor. What's great about Cursor is you can still actually get access to the terminal from within Cursor itself. And you can use a hotkey or press this button up here, and it opens the terminal. So just like we saw before, we can see that we're inside the knowledge terminal. And this is great because I can run any command that I need inside of this specific terminal. So just like we did before, if I wanted to see all the files again, I'll just type in ls and we can see that. Now, this is where I'd actually start my Claude Code session. So I can run Claude dangerously skip permissions, and now I've got access to Claude Code inside of Cursor. And this is essentially my setup. So over 90% of my coding gets written by me prompting Claude Code inside of Cursor, so I could chat with Claude Code and have it update this. Or what's really great about Cursor is I can now open another terminal. And here, I'm actually going to run the site that I've made here. I know that the command to typically run a website like this is going to be npm run dev, but you can ask Claude Code how to run the application that you're making, and it'll give you those instructions. So I can open up npm run dev, and it's going to start the local version of this product, and I can click this link, and it opens up what I'm working with. So I've got this project, and what I could do now is essentially get Claude Code to update this project. So we can see that it's called KB, and as an example, I can get it to update the name of our app from KB to KB2 and watch it make that change. So here it's going to work in the background and do a relatively simple change. We can see it's done, and I probably just need to hit refresh, and there it is, KB2. So we didn't edit any code. You don't have to know code. You can just tell Claude Code what you want done, and it's going to do it. I prefer using that setup than Claude Code inside of the Claude desktop app. Here you can see a lot of the similar directory structure that you might have in Cursor, but just out of habit for me, over the last 2 years of using Cursor, I've kept that as my environment. Whereas Claude Code only started to exist in November of last year, and this desktop app is getting better every month. So even 2 or 3 months ago, this didn't exist. So I haven't changed my working habits just yet. Whereas I'm sure many people are actually using Claude Code inside of this UI, and maybe that's their preference. So if you've got a paid Claude account and you're wanting to take the next step in terms of AI-driven development, that's how I would use the free version of Cursor to use your already existing Claude Code subscription to get building what you want to build. But if we come back to Cursor and you're opting to use the paid version of Cursor and not have a Claude subscription or a ChatGPT subscription, then this is where Cursor is starting to differentiate themselves. And that's through this agent chat. Now, I don't use this a lot, so I'm going to keep it pretty high level, but this agent window is essentially Cursor's version of Claude Code. So just like we've got a text prompt here and we've got a text prompt here in the terminal, they're essentially doing the same thing. So for instance, you can come to this button here and you can see that you can be in agent mode, plan mode, debug mode, or ask mode. Agent mode will select the mode it needs for the task it's trying to accomplish. And that's typically what you'd leave it on. In Claude, you can see there's several modes here. In this case, I've got bypass permissions on, but if I press Shift Tab, I can scroll through different modes. So I could actually enter plan mode here, where I can just have a Q&A with Claude, get it to do research, and it'll do it here without actually editing any files. And that's what this plan mode is inside of Cursor. But the second part of how and why Cursor is differentiating themselves is the fact that they're actually able to work with almost any model. So right now, it's got model selection on auto, but you can actually select what model you want to use. So in the case of Claude Code, you're only going to be running Anthropic's models, Sonnet or Opus. And in Cursor, you can actually have your Cursor agent use those exact same models. But let's say all of a sudden OpenAI develops the strongest coding model out there, and you want to work with that model. You can see that GPT 5.5 is already enabled inside of Cursor. They've also got Google's Gemini 3.1 Pro. And if they don't have a model, you can add your own models through this configuration panel. And that's a massive benefit. You can get access to whatever the best model is without changing your coding environment. The only downside to this is you're going to have to add an API key to access those models. So Claude Code will actually use a Claude Code subscription. And that's how you're able to use hundreds, if not thousands of dollars of token usage every month, despite only paying $20 or $100 a month. Because right now, these model providers want you using their harness. So Anthropic wants you to use Claude Code rather than Cursor or rather than Codex. So they're willing to subsidize token usage when it's used inside of their infrastructure. Codex is doing the exact same. You're not going to get those same benefits using the API pricing and linking that into Cursor. That's the trade-off. But don't worry, because Cursor's got an answer to this, and that's their own model. The Composer series is actually created by Cursor. So when you subscribe to a paid plan inside of Cursor, the biggest benefit you're going to get is access to these Composer models. And if you remember, at the start of the video, I said that that's why SpaceX is interested in Cursor, partially because the composer models in the future, or XAI, will most likely be available as one of the default or primary models to be used inside of Cursor. So just like Anthropic has Claude Code to run the Claude models, OpenAI has Codex to run their coding models, XAI will have their models being able to be run through Cursor. Now, what's cool with Cursor, they've got some different features that will potentially make this something you might like more than Claude Code. And that's things like multiple agents. So you can make specific agents that sit inside Cursor and can run specific tasks onto your code base or file base. So you could make an email agent which writes emails based on the product features in your code base, and that would live here. But personally, because Cursor isn't my daily driver, I'm not utilizing that here. That's why it's empty. But I could see people using subagents like I use skills inside of Claude Code. Now, I did say I didn't want to do a tutorial, but I'll do a very brief quick start on how to actually use Cursor. The first thing you're going to want to do is, once you've got the app installed on your desktop, is open up a new project. So open project and press new folder and write out your directory name and hit open. Now you've got an empty screen, and then this is just where I would talk to my agent. So you might want to build a UI around a spreadsheet. So I'm going to pull that spreadsheet in to this folder path, and you can see here it's pretty poorly formatted. Next, I'm just going to come up with my basic prompt that tells Cursor that I have a basic CSV that shows a bill of materials for a project and that I want it visualized. I'm going to hit run, and now it's going to do all the coding just as Claude Code would do all this coding. And just like that, in one or 2 minutes, it's completed the website just as Claude Code would. We can see it's given us instructions, and I'm just going to try to get it to run it itself so that we can actually see what it built. And just like the previous project, it generated this URL for me, and I can click it and view it here. And you can see this is that same spreadsheet, and view this spreadsheet how I would want to, any way that I want. From here, I could continue talking to Cursor, asking it to make updates as needed, or even help me publish this site live. So while my personal preference is running Claude Code inside of Cursor, it's really up to you. Pick your favorite models, pick your favorite harness, and get coding. That's actually what I think is the most important part of 2026. It's getting comfortable and familiar with all of your AI-driven software development options so that you can fully leverage yourself and your business. There's no right or wrong answer. The only wrong thing is not starting. If you haven't seen it yet, you can check out my video on the Claude desktop app, which gives a very high-level summary of Claude and how you can work with things like Claude Code in a simpler environment than this. But frankly, I think this would be a great use of your time, is spending 1 hour playing around in Cursor and developing the basics for AI-driven software development.